Have you ever felt that paradoxically, it's in the loneliest moments of your life when you've learned the deepest lessons, when you've experienced insights that never came during years of social buzz? If so, you're not alone in this experience. In fact, you're participating in one of the most fascinating phenomena studied by consciousness neuroscience. Today we're going to explore a revolutionary perspective on solitude that could completely transform how you see it. Not as a burden you must avoid, but as a silent teacher that has unique gifts to offer you. And we'll do it guided by one of the most brilliant and enigmatic scientists Mexico has ever produced, Jacobo Grinberg. Grinberg, a neurophysiologist pioneer in consciousness studies, dedicated his career to unraveling the mysteries of how our mind functions when it finds itself in extraordinary states. His discoveries about synergic theory reveal something amazing to us. Solitude is not simply the absence of company, but a specific neurological state that can catalyze profound transformations in your mental structure. Imagine for a moment that your brain is like a sophisticated recording studio. During the day, it's constantly processing multiple signals. The voices of people around you, visual stimuli, social demands, external expectations. It's like having dozens of microphones open simultaneously, capturing a chaos of information that must be processed in real time. But what happens when you turn off all those external microphones? When solitude arrives, when social noise fades away, something extraordinary begins to happen in your brain. According to Grinberg, it's precisely in these moments when your neurological system can access frequencies of information that are normally completely blocked by the noise of constant social interaction. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed how your clearest thoughts, your wisest decisions, your moments of greatest creativity usually come when you're alone? This is not coincidence. It's pure neuroscience. Grinberg developed what he called synergic theory, a revolutionary conceptual framework that explains how our consciousness interacts with a field of information he called the lattice or neuronal grid. This grid functions as an energetic and informational matrix that connects all consciousnesses, but requires specific conditions to be consciously accessed. One of these conditions is precisely solitude. Not solitude as forced isolation or as escape from reality, but solitude as a deliberate state of inner receptivity. It's like tuning a high-frequency radio. You need silence to capture the most subtle signals. In his experiments with Mazatec shamans, Grinberg observed something fascinating. These individuals, who had developed extraordinary perception capabilities, had spent long periods in solitude during their initiation processes. It wasn't coincidence. Solitude had been their principal teacher, configuring their neuronal structure in ways that constant social interaction never would have allowed. But let's go deeper. What exactly happens in your brain when you're alone? Grinberg discovered that during states of contemplative solitude, what he called neuronal coherence occurs. That is, different areas of the brain begin to synchronize in patterns that normally don't occur during social activity. Think about this. When you're with other people, much of your brain activity is dedicated to processing social signals, maintaining your image, responding to expectations, navigating interpersonal dynamics. It's as if your mind were a computer processor that's running multiple programs simultaneously, limiting the capacity available for deeper processes. But in solitude, those social programs deactivate. Suddenly, you have access to cognitive resources that are normally occupied with other tasks. It's in this space where what Grinberg called synergic thinking can emerge, a form of mental processing that integrates information in ways that transcend ordinary linear thinking. Have you ever experienced those moments in solitude where you suddenly understand something that had been confusing for weeks? where the solution to a complex problem appears like a flash of clarity. That's synergic thinking in action. Grinberg documented that these experiences are not simply psychological, but have measurable neurological correlates. During states of meditative solitude, he observed specific changes in brainwave activity, particularly an increase in gamma waves, associated with moments of insight and profound understanding. But here comes the most fascinating part. Grinberg proposed that these moments of clarity you experience in solitude are not simply the result of thinking better, but of accessing a field of information that transcends your individual experience. It's as if solitude allowed you to tune into a frequency of wisdom that's always available, but normally obscured by the noise of social life. Now, reflect on your own experience. How many times have you avoided solitude because you interpret it as boredom, as emptiness, as something that must be filled as quickly as possible? Our culture has conditioned us to see solitude as a problem to solve, as a lack to fill. But what if it were exactly the opposite? Grinberg suggested that solitude is one of the most fertile states for consciousness growth, not because it's comfortable, but precisely because it forces us to find internal resources we didn't know we had. It's like an athlete's training, uncomfortable in the moment, but essential for developing capabilities that can't emerge any other way. In the shamanic tradition that Grinberg studied, there exists a concept called the shaman's dark night. It refers to periods of intense solitude, sometimes of months or even years, during which the future healer must confront their deepest fears, their limitations, their most ingrained mental patterns. These periods are not punishments, but necessary initiations. Why necessary? Because it's only in solitude where you can really encounter yourself, without social masks, without the roles you play for others, without the distractions that keep you away from your true nature. It's a direct encounter with what Grinberg called your synergic core, the most authentic essence of your being. Imagine that all your life you've been seeing your reflection in distorted mirrors, others' expectations, social norms, cultural conditioning. Solitude is like finding finally a perfect mirror where you can see yourself as you really are. It can be shocking at first, but it's the foundation of any authentic transformation. Grinberg observed that people who had gone through significant periods of conscious solitude developed what he called neuronal autonomy. That is, the ability to generate states of well-being, clarity, and purpose independently of external circumstances. Not because they had disconnected from the world, but because they had found their internal center. This neuronal autonomy is crucial in our modern world. We live in an era of constant stimulation, permanent connection, infinite informational noise. But what happens when all that external stimulation vanishes? Do you have sufficient internal resources to maintain your balance, your clarity, your purpose? Many people discover they don't. They discover they've developed such a deep dependence on external stimulation that solitude feels like an unbearable void. But Grinberg teaches us that this apparent void is actually a space of infinite potential. In his studies on meditation and altered states of consciousness, Grinberg identified that there's a fundamental difference between reactive solitude and receptive solitude. Reactive solitude is when you avoid being alone because you feel uncomfortable, bored, or anxious. Receptive solitude is when you consciously embrace these states as opportunities for inner exploration. The difference is like being in a dark room. You can be there with fear, wishing for light to come, or you can be there with curiosity, allowing your eyes to adapt until you begin to see shapes and textures that were previously invisible. Receptive solitude allows you to perceive aspects of yourself and reality that are completely inaccessible when your attention is constantly directed outward. But how do you cultivate this receptive solitude? Grinberg developed what he called fluid attention techniques. It's not about meditating in the traditional sense, but about maintaining an open and non-judgmental awareness during periods of internal silence. One of these techniques consists simply of observing your thoughts without trying to change or judge them. It's like being a scientist observing a natural phenomenon, curious, attentive, but without agenda. Grinberg discovered that when you maintain this attitude during periods of solitude, you begin to perceive patterns in your thoughts that normally go unnoticed. These patterns, according to his theory, are windows into what he called your personal neuronal program, the specific configuration of beliefs, reactions, and perceptions that determine your experience of reality. Solitude allows you to examine this program objectively, identifying aspects that serve you and aspects that limit you. But here comes something even deeper. Grinberg proposed that these moments of self-examination in solitude not only allow you to understand your neuronal program, but to consciously modify it. It's like having access to the source code of your conscious experience. Imagine being able to identify those thought patterns that generate anxiety, those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck, those automatic reactions that sabotage your relationships, and being able to work with them directly. This isn't fantasy, it's the practical application of Grinberg's discoveries about conscious neuroplasticity. In his experiments, Grinberg documented cases of people who, after structured periods of contemplative solitude, showed measurable changes in their brain activity. They not only felt different, their brain literally functioned differently. They had reprogrammed their neurological hardware through conscious software. Have you ever noticed how after a retreat, a solitary vacation, or even a complete day without social interaction, you return with a completely different perspective on problems that previously seemed unsolvable? That's conscious neuroplasticity in action. But Grinberg also warned about something important. Not all solitude is transformative. There's a crucial difference between generative solitude and degenerative solitude. Generative solitude is active, conscious, intentional. You use time alone to explore, to create, to connect with deeper aspects of yourself. Degenerative solitude is passive, reactive, often filled with repetitive thoughts that lead nowhere. How do you distinguish between one and the other? Grinberg suggested paying attention to what he called neuronal coherence markers. During generative solitude, you experience moments of clarity, spontaneous insights, sensations of connection with something greater than yourself. During degenerative solitude, you experience rumination, anxiety, feelings of emptiness or boredom. The key lies in developing what he called synergic intention, the ability to consciously direct your attention toward productive aspects of the solitary experience. It's not about forcing anything, but about creating internal conditions for solitude to reveal its gifts. One of the most powerful techniques Grinberg developed was what he called conscious internal dialogue. During periods of solitude, instead of simply letting your mind wander, you establish a deliberate dialogue with yourself. Not as if you were crazy, but as if you were your own wisest counselor. You ask deep questions. What am I avoiding? What is this moment asking of me? What wisdom do I need to integrate? And then, instead of responding from your usual analytical mind, you allow answers to emerge from a deeper place. Grinberg discovered that these answers often contain information that the ordinary conscious mind cannot access. It's like having a conversation with the wisest version of yourself. And the fascinating thing is that according to Grinberg's studies, this wiser version is not a fantasy, but a real aspect of your consciousness that becomes accessible when you create the right conditions of receptive solitude. But let's go even deeper. Grinberg proposed something revolutionary. That conscious solitude not only transforms you, but generates what he called morphogenetic fields of coherence. That is, When a person develops certain states of consciousness through solitude, they create an energetic and informational field that facilitates other people's access to similar states. This means that your practice of conscious solitude is not just personal. It's a service to the collective evolution of consciousness. Every moment you spend in receptive solitude, developing neuronal autonomy, expanding your internal coherence, you're contributing to a field that makes that coherence more accessible to others. Think about the great innovators, artists, scientists, spiritual leaders in history. Almost all of them spent significant periods in solitude, not because they were antisocial, but because they intuitively understood that certain types of insights, certain forms of creativity, certain levels of wisdom can only emerge when the mind is free from constant social distractions and expectations. Einstein developed his theory of relativity during long periods of solitary contemplation. Tesla received his most revolutionary insights during solitary nighttime walks. Mystics from all traditions have recognized that certain states of consciousness are only accessible in deep solitude. But what does this mean for your practical life? Grinberg suggested that even small periods of conscious solitude can have profound cumulative effects. You don't need to become a hermit. You need to develop an intentional relationship with solitude. This could mean waking up 30 minutes earlier each day to have silence time before the social world begins. It could mean walking alone without headphones, allowing your mind to process the day's experiences. It could mean setting aside an hour on weekends to simply be with yourself without agenda. The key, according to Grinberg, is regularity and intention. It's not about accumulating hours of solitude, but about cultivating a consistent practice of conscious connection with yourself. It's like watering a plant. Small, regular amounts are more effective than large, sporadic quantities. Now, let's be honest. Our culture makes this challenging. We live in a society that interprets solitude as social failure, that constantly pushes us toward connectivity, entertainment, stimulation. But Grinberg reminds us that the greatest advances in human evolution have come from individuals who were able to resist these pressures and find spaces of internal silence. And here's the crucial point. Conscious solitude doesn't distance you from meaningful relationships, it deepens them. When you've developed a solid relationship with yourself, when you've found your internal center, when you've learned to generate well-being and clarity independently of external circumstances, you have much more to offer in your relationships with others. Grinberg observed that people who had developed neuronal autonomy through conscious solitude tended to have more authentic, deeper, less neurotic relationships. Not because they were perfect, but because they didn't depend on others for their basic emotional stability. It's like the difference between two people who hug because they're desperate for human contact, and two people who hug from a place of personal fullness. The quality of connection is completely different. One of the most powerful concepts Grinberg developed was creative solitude. He observed that certain types of creativity can only emerge when the mind is free from external influences, when it can explore territories of thought that haven't been contaminated by others' expectations or judgments. Have you ever had a brilliant idea in the shower, during a solitary walk, in those moments between sleep and wakefulness? That's creative solitude functioning. Your mind, free from immediate social demands, can make connections it normally wouldn't make, can explore possibilities it normally wouldn't consider. Grinberg discovered that these experiences of creative solitude can be deliberately cultivated, not just waiting for them to happen accidentally, but creating conditions for them to emerge regularly. This involves developing what he called receptive patience, the ability to be in solitude without immediately filling it with distraction or activity. In our world of instant gratification, this receptive patience is a skill that must be consciously developed. We're so accustomed to immediately filling any void with entertainment, information, or social interaction that we've lost the ability to simply be with ourselves without doing anything. But it's precisely in these moments of doing nothing where the deepest processes occur. Grinberg documented that the brain, when not focused on specific tasks, enters what we now know as the default mode network. It's in this state where experience integration occurs, synthesis of apparently unrelated information, emergence of creative insights. When we constantly avoid these states through constant stimulation, we deprive ourselves of one of the most important processes for personal growth and consciousness evolution. Let me share with you one of Grinberg's most fascinating experiments. He took two groups of university students. One group spent 2 hours daily for 2 weeks in what he called structured solitude, time consciously dedicated to being alone, without devices, without entertainment, just with their thoughts. The other group continued with their normal routine. After 2 weeks, students who had practiced structured solitude showed significant improvements in creativity tests, problem solving, and what he called emotional coherence. But most interesting is that they also reported feeling more connected to others, more empathetic, more capable of deep relationships. This completely contradicts the popular belief that solitude disconnects us from others. Grinberg's results suggest exactly the opposite. Conscious solitude connects us more deeply, both with ourselves and with others. Why? Because when you've done the internal work of knowing yourself, accepting yourself, developing your emotional autonomy, you can relate to others from a place of conscious choice rather than unconscious need. You can be present with others because you want to be, not because you need to be to avoid the discomfort of being with yourself. Grinberg also investigated what he called synergic memory, the idea that during states of deep solitude, we can access aspects of our experience that are normally below the threshold of consciousness. Memories, insights, understandings that have been stored in what he called neuronal libraries, inaccessible during normal social activity. It's as if solitude functioned as a key that opens mental files that are normally closed. Many people report that during periods of solitude, childhood memories emerge, understandings about behavior patterns, clarity about important decisions they need to make. This isn't simple nostalgia or superficial introspection. According to Grinberg, it's conscious access to deeper layers of stored experience, layers that contain crucial information for personal growth, but are hidden during normal social functioning. Now, let's talk about something many experience but few understand: resistance to solitude. Have you ever felt a kind of anxiety or restlessness when you're left alone? That urgency to connect with someone, check your phone, put on music, do anything to fill the silence. Grinberg explained that this resistance is not coincidental. Our mind is programmed to avoid states that could reveal aspects of ourselves we've been avoiding. Solitude can be uncomfortable precisely because it confronts us with parts of ourselves we've kept in the shadows. But this discomfort, according to Grinberg, is exactly where the transformative potential lies. It's not a signal that you should avoid solitude, but that you have internal work to do. It's like muscle pain after exercise, uncomfortable but indicative that growth is occurring. Grinberg developed what he called a conscious confrontation protocol, a way to work with resistance to solitude instead of avoiding it. When you feel that urgency to escape silence, instead of doing it immediately, you ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What is this discomfort showing me? Sometimes the answer is simple: you're avoiding boredom. But other times the answer is deeper: you're avoiding feelings you need to process, decisions you need to make, truths about yourself you need to recognize. The conscious confrontation protocol doesn't mean torturing yourself by staying in discomfort indefinitely. It means developing the ability to be present with discomfort long enough to understand what it's trying to teach you. One of the most revolutionary aspects of Grinberg's research was his discovery that conscious solitude can dramatically accelerate personal growth. What might normally take years of therapy or personal development can occur in weeks or months when you have conscious access to these states of deep introspection. Why? Because in solitude, without social distractions and defenses, you can have direct access to the internal mechanisms that generate your experience. It's like being a mechanic who can see the engine directly instead of just observing external symptoms. Grinberg documented cases of people who, after intensive periods of structured solitude, experienced what he called synergic reorganization, fundamental changes in their way of perceiving, thinking, and feeling that normally required years of personal work. But it's important to understand that these changes are not automatic. They require what Grinberg called conscious participation, the willingness to be present with what emerges during solitude, without judging it, without trying to change it immediately, but simply observing it with scientific curiosity. In his studies of shamans and traditional healers, Grinberg observed that many of their most extraordinary powers had developed during periods of intense solitude, often in nature, where they had to confront not only their fears and limitations, but also develop internal resources they didn't know they had. This is one of solitude's most important functions. It forces you to discover and develop internal resources that remain dormant, while you depend on external sources of stimulation, validation, and support. It's like developing emotional and mental muscle that can only be strengthened when you don't have external support to lean on. But Grinberg also emphasized that the most transformative solitude is not what you seek to escape the world, but what you seek to be able to participate in the world more authentically and powerfully. It's not solitude as escape, but solitude as preparation. Imagine an athlete who retreats to train in solitude, not because they hate competition, but because they want to compete at their highest level. Conscious solitude works similarly. You temporarily withdraw from social interaction to develop capabilities that will allow you to participate in life more completely and authentically. Toward the end of his career, before his mysterious disappearance in 1994, Grinberg was developing what he called solitude technologies, specific methods to maximize the transformative potential of solitary states. These weren't complicated techniques, but simple yet precise ways to direct attention during periods of silence. One of these technologies was what he called consciousness mapping, using periods of solitude to systematically explore different mental and emotional states, observing how each state affects your perception, your creativity, your problem-solving capacity. Another was temporal dialogue, using solitude to have conscious conversations with past and future versions of yourself, extracting wisdom from your past experience and clarity about your future directions. These technologies may sound strange at first, but Grinberg had tested them experimentally and found they produced measurable results in terms of well-being, creativity, and mental clarity. The most beautiful thing about these technologies is that they don't require special equipment, long training, or perfect conditions. They can be practiced in your own home, during the natural moments of solitude that already exist in your life, but directing attention more consciously and intentionally. Now let me ask you something important. After everything we've explored, how are you going to change your relationship with solitude? Are you going to continue seeing it as something to avoid, or are you going to begin exploring it as a teacher that has unique gifts to offer you? Because here's the deep truth Grinberg discovered. In a world that's becoming increasingly noisy, more connected, more full of constant distraction, the ability to be consciously alone is becoming one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Not because it makes you antisocial, but because it makes you more authentically social. Not because it disconnects you from the world, but because it connects you with yourself in a way that you can participate in the world from a place of fullness rather than need. Grinberg believed we are at the threshold of what he called the era of mature individual consciousness, a time in human history where people will learn to develop neuronal autonomy, internal coherence, and synergic wisdom that will allow them to contribute to the world in ways that haven't been possible before. But this era won't arrive automatically. It requires individuals willing to do the internal work, willing to face the discomfort of solitude, willing to develop internal resources that current culture doesn't foster. If you've made it this far in this video, you've already demonstrated that you have the curiosity and mental openness this work requires. The question now is, are you going to take action? Let me offer you a direct challenge. For the next 7 days, commit 30 minutes each day to what Grinberg called structured solitude. Without phone, without music, without book, without any external distraction. Just you with yourself. Use these 30 minutes to practice what we've discussed, observing your thoughts without judging them, asking deep questions and allowing answers to emerge, exploring what any discomfort you feel is trying to teach you. At the end of each session, write 1 or 2 sentences about what you observed, what you learned, or what surprised you. Not to analyze it, but simply to record it. After 7 days, review your notes. Grinberg predicted that even 1 week of structured solitude can produce insights and changes that normally take months to develop through other methods. But I'm not asking you to trust my word or Grinberg's theories. I'm asking you to be your own scientist, to experiment directly with these states and observe what happens. And here's my promise. If you do this experiment honestly, if you really commit to structured solitude for a week, your relationship with solitude will change forever. You'll begin to see it not as a void to fill, but as a space of infinite potential. More importantly, you'll begin to discover aspects of yourself that have been waiting in silence to be recognized. Talents you didn't know you had. Wisdom you've been accumulating without realizing it. Clarity about directions you need to take in your life. Grinberg used to say that solitude is like a mirror that reflects not only who you are, but who you can become. It's in solitude where your highest potentials are revealed, where your most authentic contributions to the world are incubated. If this message has resonated with you, if you've recognized your own experience in what we've explored, let me know in the comments. Share what has been your deepest experience in solitude. What have you discovered about yourself when no one else was watching? What insights have come during those moments of silence that the noise of the world had been blocking? Your story doesn't just interest me, but it might be exactly what another person needs to hear to have the courage to explore their own conscious solitude. Remember what Grinberg discovered about morphogenetic fields. When you share your experience of growth through solitude, you're contributing to a field that makes this experience more accessible to others. And if you know someone who's struggling with solitude, who sees it as their enemy instead of their teacher, share this video with them. Sometimes, a different perspective is all we need to transform an experience that seemed negative into an opportunity for extraordinary growth. But more important than sharing this video is that you begin applying what we've discussed. Information without application is just intellectual entertainment. And what Grinberg has taught us is too valuable to remain only at the intellectual level. So here's my final call to action. Don't let this video end here. Make it the beginning of a new relationship with your solitude. Implement the 7-day structured solitude challenge. Turn solitude into your personal laboratory of conscious growth. And while you do it, remember the final words Grinberg wrote before his disappearance. Conscious solitude is not the end of the human path, but the beginning of the superhuman path. It's where you discover you're not alone, because you're with yourself, the most important company you'll ever have. In a world that constantly pushes you toward distraction, toward superficial connection, toward constant noise, choosing conscious solitude is a revolutionary act. It's declaring that your inner growth is more important than social comfort. It's betting on your highest potential even when no one else can see it. Solitude, seen through Jacobo Grinberg's eyes, is not a condition you suffer, but an opportunity you embrace. Not a void you fill, but a space you explore. Not an absence you lament, but a presence you celebrate. The presence of yourself in all your complexity, in all your potential, in all your extraordinary capacity for growth. Every moment you spend in conscious solitude is an investment in the most authentic and powerful version of yourself. It's time dedicated to developing internal resources that will serve you throughout your life. It's space created for aspects of your being that the world needs to see to emerge. Because here's the final truth Grinberg discovered. The world doesn't need another person who has learned to fit perfectly into existing molds. The world needs people who have found their deepest authenticity, their most unique creativity, their most personal wisdom. And these qualities only develop in conscious solitude. So go, embrace your solitude as the teacher it is. Allow it to teach you what it has to teach you. And when you return to the world, bring with you the gifts that only it could reveal. We'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the mysteries and wonders of human consciousness. Until then, remember, you're not alone when you're alone. You're in the best possible company. Your own.